So one of the first Steam Deck videos that I did on this channel was just to list out a whole bunch of open world games that ran great on the deck. Some were a little bit older, some were a little bit more modern, but one thing they all had in common was they gave you a big bonkers world to explore and just have a good time in. So I decided I would go ahead and follow that up with even more open world games that you can play on the Steam Deck, and that's what today's video is all about, is just highlighting even more open world experiences that you can go grab for the Steam Deck right now and have an amazing time and know that it's going to perform well on the hardware. Plus, since I was playing a lot of Spider-Man anyways for that video on Tuesday, it's kind of had me jonesing for more open world experiences anyways. So let's go ahead and jump right in with a game that's a little bit on the older side, but nonetheless is a game that I think a lot of people overlook, and it's a whole lot of fun, and that is Sunset Overdrive. Sunset Overdrive is an action-adventure shooter with a bonkers open world for you to run around in and traverse in incredibly satisfying ways. It was made by Insomniac and released way back in 2014, but despite being a little bit long in the tooth at this point, it runs beautifully on the deck. Now, to be fair, I couldn't quite get it to 60 FPS, but if you max your frame and refresh rates to 40, this might be the best case I've seen yet for balancing power consumption with performance, and it remained pretty stable as I continued to just bounce around and grind and just explore the city. And Sunset Overdrive is such a color bomb for the eyes that it makes a very strong case for the next iteration of Steam Deck's hardware to have an OLED display, because games like this honestly deserve it. In Sunset Overdrive, you'll be navigating Sunset City in 2027, and tragically the world is overrun by mutants that have been transformed by an energy drink. And as a former employee of Fizco, you'll customize your character and jump into the world to hopefully clean up the chaos. And I do mean jump in, because what really sets Sunset Overdrive apart is just the incredible range of traversal options that you have at your disposal. Once you dive in, you'll be wall running and grinding and air dashing and engaging in all other forms of parkour to get from A to B, blasting mutants along the way with a ridiculous arsenal of over-the-top weaponry which you can power up with amps, these being weapon mods that are powered by your style meter. So wall running and grinds and bouncing aren't just stylistically fun to look at, but pretty much essential to performing well against hordes of mutants that look to take you out as you continually try to make sure you have the most powerful armaments available. Now, tonally speaking, I would say feels very similar to Saints Row the Third in that it definitely doesn't take itself too seriously and is legitimately hilarious, despite maybe like the occasional dated reference here and there. But make no mistake, loads of modern games only wish they could aspire to the type mechanics that are on display here, but as an Insomniac game, I guess that really shouldn't come as a surprise. Throw in the fact that you can run through Sunset City with up to 7 other players in a Chaos Squad co-op mode, and it's one of the funnest dystopian cities you'll ever run around in. And I gotta tell you, I really hadn't touched this game since like the Xbox One launch window, I think is when that came out, and I remember it being a lot of fun back then, but tragically it just, again, fell into the backlog like so many of my games do. But this one is super fun and responsive in the portable format, so much so that I went ahead and moved it into my favorites collection, which is kind of like me giving a gold star to a game that I definitely want to spend some more time playing. So yeah, if you've never played Sunset Overdrive before, it's completely ridiculous, it's a gorgeous game to look at, and again, it's sort of got the star power of Insomniac behind it, so it controls really well, it plays really well. Definitely worth a look. Although if you prefer a more modern, pre-societal collapse spin for your open world chaos, you can always jump out of Sunset City and into Night City with Cyberpunk 2077. Now here's the thing, we all know that the Cyberpunk launch was an absolute train wreck when it dropped a couple of years ago, between lackluster PS4 performance, a litany of technical issues, and honestly it's probably going to go down in history as just one of the most disastrous launches in gaming history. But all that being said, I played through and beat Cyberpunk 2077 on the Xbox Series X right around launch, and while I did encounter some glitches, I had an amazing time with that game. Plus, I mean, without it, we wouldn't have gotten one of the greatest Keanu moments of all time.
You're breathtaking!
And having now played through its opening hours on the Steam Deck, it is a surprisingly solid experience now, and I didn't hit any of the weird quest bugs or graphical glitches that I ran across on my initial outing with it. So if you're looking for a Cyberpunk adventure with just like a mind-boggling amount of side quests, and not just side quests, but really high-quality side quests that really rival the main quest line, Cyberpunk 2077 still provides a really fun open-world gameplay experience. Now obviously playing this on the deck, the graphics aren't going to match the highest end gaming rigs or anything like that, but they're no slouch either, and the artistic beauty of Night City isn't lost in translation scrunching down to the small screen of the Steam Deck. Even when cruising through the city at high speeds through some of its more populated districts, it still continued to perform really well on the Steam Deck. Granted, it will chew through your battery really quickly, and I would say you'll only get about an hour and a half's worth of play out of it before you have to recharge. But still, if you just want to jump into Night City for your Cyberpunk fix for a few quick missions or to start a random firefight with some innocent bystanders, you can definitely do that, and it will definitely perform well. And even though I haven't really encountered any bugs yet playing on the Steam Deck, I'm sure they're in there, but to CD Projekt Red's credit, they have at least continued to do development on the game, patch and update it over time, so I'm confident in saying that you jump into Cyberpunk 2077 now, you will definitely have a better experience than had you done so at launch. Although if you want to go a little darker and dirtier for your open world dystopian needs, you could always jump into 2015's Mad Max. Now this is an open world game obviously based on the Mad Max franchise from Avalanche Studios, and you'll progress through this dangerous wasteland rebuilding your vehicle, the Magnum Opus, while en route to the Plains of Silence, which is a place where Max hopes to find some peace. And one of the things that I really liked about Mad Max is that it does have a focus on vehicular combat as well as traditional combat, which I thought totally made sense obviously for Mad Max, but it's not like you're just going to be running around in the desert engaging in melee combat, although that's excellent. Now personally, I hadn't revisited this since the Xbox One days, but more than a few commenters pointed out in the last open world games video that I did that this definitely should have been on the list, so it was a real treat to revisit this. And I can't believe I never got around to finishing this game because it feels so incredibly polished. The melee combat lifts a page straight out of the Arkham playbook with really fluid animation and this kinetic quality that just feels great. And it also seems like some of the design decisions here were just a little bit ahead of their time in 2015 with things like using color as a subtle way to guide Max to an objective or interactive element without beating you over the head with it with just like a ton of on-screen prompts or HUD elements. And speaking of color, something else that surprised me is just how incredibly gorgeous this game artistically speaking. When I first fired it up, I was expecting it to be pretty drab and not at all out of place with like the gritty, grimy shooters of the mid-2000s, but somehow the Wasteland here just looks incredibly gorgeous with a great contrast between hues of orange, blue, and brown that really pop instead of just looking muddy and uninteresting. And after spending a couple of hours with it, it kept a solid 60 FPS without breaking a sweat. Which makes sense, because I mean it is 7 years old at this point, but still, it's nice to see that a game this polished still holds up, not just as a gameplay experience, but also that it performs well on the deck and doesn't chew through battery as quickly as some of the other options on this list. Next up is a slightly older title that came out in 2012, initially on the PlayStation 3, but then got a remaster a couple years later in 2014, and that is Sleeping Dogs, or Sleepy Dogs. Either one. Now sadly this is another game that drifted into my backlog around the PS3 era. I knew it was a good game, but something else stole my attention around the time, and I never really got back to it, and let me tell you, that was a mistake. You play as Shen, an undercover cop tasked with infiltrating the triads in Hong Kong. And while it's more of an open world than you might get from a Yakuza game, you'll definitely see some similarities there, particularly in the melee combat or on-foot chase sequences, and much like Mad Max, it's not too dissimilar to the Arkham style of melee combat. Although I will say it seems to have a little bit more nuance and flexibility to it. There's plenty there to keep every fight interesting, but not so much that it feels overwhelming or that you're not going to play efficiently when you're surrounded by a pack of goons you need to take down. Artistically, I love how Hong Kong is designed because the city at scale by itself is interesting, but then more confined moments when you're moseying along with an NPC, engaged in dialogue, or if you're fighting through close quarters, it feels like a lot of thought went into the art direction here to make those spaces feel especially atmospheric and moody. The graphics definitely feel like a remaster of an early title and they show their age, but what it might lack in technical superiority, it definitely makes up for artistically. Now I haven't really spent enough time with Sleeping Dogs yet, but I have a sneaking suspicion that I'm going to because, much like Mad Max, both of these games just feel like they've held up incredibly well since their original releases. Plus I just love the open world genre to begin with, but these two in particular just feel really high quality, really polished, and the fact that they play and perform so well on the deck means that these are prime candidates for how I'm going to spend a lot of my downtime when I'm not playing games for making content, and really I'm just playing games just for me. And finally, of course I'm going to put Spider-Man on this list because if we open an Insomniac game, to me it only makes sense to close with an Insomniac game, plus it just came out. Now I already talked about Spider-Man at greater length on Tuesday's video, so I'm not going to waste a whole bunch of time here just going through everything about Spider-Man, but if you've never played it before, you should definitely jump into it. Not just because it's a great superhero game, although it totally is that, but because as far as open world games go, this is probably one of the most polished ones that I've ever played. No, it's not as big as other open worlds out there, right? I get it. It's not the size of something like, like Skyrim or No Man's Sky or something like that, but it provides an experience that is truly fun throughout its entire runtime, save for maybe a couple of ill-advised stealth sections, which I've debated that before, but I don't think they were that bad. They break up the action, yeah, it's okay. And naturally, if you've got a big open world, you want to make sure anytime that you have to get from A to B, that's going to be fun to do so, and out of all of the games on this list, Spider-Man is still the funnest in that department. The web mechanics in this game are just absolutely perfect, and it feels today the way I thought I remembered Spider-Man 2 playing back in the early 2000s. Not to mention the entire city is divvied up into easily manageable districts with a ton of activities that are just peppered throughout, most of which are an incredibly good time. And all open world activities and collectathons aside, at its core, the main story for Spider-Man is just truly, truly excellent, and I would highly recommend that you play it if you haven't, and no better time than now since it's on the Steam Deck, and it performs great at the default settings. And finally, a quick bonus that I couldn't really recommend here, but I at least tested it for this video before deciding, I don't think I'm going to put this on here, is Watch Dogs. Not Watch Dogs 2 and not Watch Dogs Legion, rather just the original Watch Dogs. It was a game that I really enjoyed, and I was excited to play it on the deck, and while it does play reasonably well after kind of a rocky installation experience where I got a couple of error messages, at first I thought it was going to be great, but unfortunately it is plagued by a lot of crackling audio issues, and anytime I had a cutscene there would be a lot of weird delays as well, where the audio would stutter in a pretty significant way, so yeah, technically I think it plays okay, but I don't think I could stand to play it for any extended period of time just because of the weird glitches that I hit. So if you don't mind that stuff, I guess you could jump into Watch Dogs, and it plays reasonably well on the Steam Deck. But yeah, in terms of the games that I've tried out that say unsupported, I think they really mean it for this one, because I don't think I could stand playing a game with horrible screechy audio like that for any, extended period of time. But if you want to experiment with it, or if you know of a workaround for Watch Dogs, I would love to hear, because again, that was a game that I enjoyed back on the Xbox One. Alright, so that's it for this one. Honestly, I just love the open world genre, at least when it's done well. But hey, what about you? Are there any open world games that you've played on the Steam Deck that you would recommend, or any that you're curious to see tested if I ever do a follow-up video to this? As always, thanks for taking the time out of your day to watch the videos. It means a lot. Take care. I will see you on the next video. Alright, bye.